For Fox 5. You all may catch her at 11 o'clock during Fox 5's evening newscast, and we're excited to have her here. She's a graduate of Emory University as well as Northwestern University Northwestern University School of Journalism in Evanston, Illinois. She's reported on a wide range of issues, whether they related to national disasters, civil rights issues. She was very involved with the Selma coverage, and we're really extremely lucky to have her tonight. One thing I do want to do is make sure I plug her social media handle. That's very important. So you all just give me 1 minute. I think this is very important to me. Let's do this. Yeah, I'm sorry, y'all. Her social media handle is Marissa M. Fox 5. So Marissa M is in Mary, Fox, the number 5. Next up we have Councilman Westmoreland. Councilman Westmoreland is newly elected councilman represented post 2 at large. So for those of you who don't know, that's an area-wide seat formerly held by Mary Norwood, who ended up running for mayor. He has a broad range of responsibility. I think he's vice chair of the Finance Executive Committee and on a number of committees with the city. Previously served as an Atlanta school board member, so where he oversaw pretty much everything that related to the budget and is very versed as it relates to educational issues. He is a graduate of Grady High School, so he's an Atlanta native, and he also attended Princeton University and goes to church right here in Atlanta, so give it for Matt Westmoreland. And I'll pause really briefly. This is what I was supposed to do in my intro. I previously served the previous mayor of Atlanta for 5 years, and I also spent time in the Obama administration. So the panelists and folks that we've assembled here today are folks that I've developed long-term relationships with. Matt, Camille and Brandon Riddick-Seals, Rukiye, Thomas. So they're very dear to my heart, and I'm very, very thankful that they came out to speak with us tonight. Next up we have Camille Love. Camille Love is the executive director of the mayor's Office of Cultural Affairs, where she's been there for a number of years. She served a number of Atlanta mayors, I think including Mayor Franklin, Mayor Reed, now Mayor Keisha Lance Bottoms. I want her to kind of go into some of the issues that she spearheads. A lot of times, again, in the business sector, we're not as aware of things that maybe happen on the arts and culture side. She served on a number of boards here in Atlanta, including the Apex Museum. She's dealt with the board with Coca-Cola Foundation, the National Black Arts Festival, you name it. She is literally lives and breathes the arts, so we're tremendously thankful to have her here this evening. And I know she has some stuff that she wants to provide you all. I think their literature is in front of you, so once again, welcome, Camille Love. Then we have Rukiye Thomas. I know her as Rukiye Edie, so if you excuse me, but Rukiye Thomas, she's currently Vice President of Business Development. She's got a long title, Business Development and I think Relationship Management for Atkins. I know I butchered the title, but she also was the former Chief of Staff to Marta CEO Keith Parker. So former Marta CEO Keith Parker, I think she spent about 5 years with Marta, and then prior to that, she managed external affairs for the Atlanta Beltline. So wealth of knowledge on the transportation front. She is a graduate of Clark Atlanta University, as well as a master's from Penn State University. So we welcome Rukiye Thomas. And before I introduce Brandon, I skipped over Camille's educational background as well, just for folks who are aware, in case there are any alma maters in the room, or excuse me, folks that graduate from our alma mater, Wake Forest University as well as Duke Law School. So, finally, good friend Brandon Riddick-Seals, who's the interim president and CEO of the Atlanta Housing Authority. Brandon oversees one of the state's largest housing authority and one of the largest housing authorities in the country. Again, let him go into the operational details of the number of employees he supervises and what his job entails. But the interesting thing about Brandon is he comes to the agency after the resignation of the previous director back in May. And he has a host of challenges specifically related to affordable housing. He's got an extensive background in commercial real estate development at a firm called Gorey. It's one of the largest private development firms in the country. One of the things, a couple of fun-filled facts about Brandon, I'd like to brag on a little bit. He was actually the first partner, African-American partner at Gorey, where he oversaw, I think it was external affairs, business development, as well as some of their cultural initiatives and hiring initiatives. Brandon is also, he's a proud graduate of Harvard University. And he was also the first student body president, African-American student body president in the history of the school. Number 3, okay.
Our Chief Justice Harold Milton was number 1.
So I'll let him talk to you about his background, but I'm extremely proud of him, and thank you, Brandon, for welcoming us and joining us on the panel.
Thank you, Tim. Glad you talked to Rick.
And again, before I go ahead and let Marissa take it away, I just wanted to kind of set the stage again. As you all know, midterm elections are very dear to us, and obviously this panel is not specific to that, but as it relates to some of the issues that you are following, as Mr. Kemp and Ms. Abrams, as well as some of the local races, as folks are debating some of these topics, what jumps out in your mind that could be critical at the state level, and what are you hoping that those candidates address on the campaign trail? I guess we can go down the line, starting with Matt.
No, Matt's fine. Good evening, everyone. My name is Matt Westmoreland, and I'm about 10 months into tenure on the Atlanta City Council, where we have a very vested interest in what our interaction with state government looks like. So I'll put a plug in here at the beginning, go Abrams. That's really all I have to say on the topic. No, I think Mayor Reed, Justin, your former boss, and the current Governor Nathan Deal kind of showed what a productive, forward-thinking, meaningful relationship can be between local and state governments. That hasn't always been the case between the city of Atlanta and state government. And I think both of those individuals would be first to tell you they probably disagreed on 80% of things, but they focused on the 20% that they agreed on and made a lot of progress for the city and the state. I am excited about electing a governor on November 6th who agrees 95% with the mayor of Atlanta, because there's a whole lot more we can do if that is the case. So I'll leave it at that.
Okay, well, I'm very excited about the platform for education. Arts education is not happening in Georgia, and studies say that children who have exposure and who have arts integrated into their education are better at everything that they do. And so that is my hope, is that I know that Stacy, who used to work at the city, will be a proponent of increasing the arts in the curriculum of the state of Georgia. That's what I'm excited about.
I'm excited about, and good evening everyone, very excited about, I had a chance to hear from candidate Abrams in detail, not too recently, maybe a few weeks ago, that I'm excited about her platform as it relates to transportation as well as housing, because those are two areas that's been near and dear to my heart, and it's something that I've been working on for probably over a decade in this city. And it seems like she gets it in a way that's exciting. She gets it to a level that is personal to her in her hometown. And so she carries her story with her in a way that says that if she does make it, and I believe and hope that she does, she'll be able to continue to advance the causes of transportation and housing, because it relates to all people at all levels. right here in the heart of the city and throughout rural Georgia.
Good evening, everybody, as well. I'm excited to share the stage with my Leadership Georgia classmate, Rukiye Thomas, and thank you all for having me. Many of you all who know me prior to my official capacity now know that I had no shying away from political activity for areas of focus that I believe in, but in this official capacity, I am nonpartisan and have to be. But if I weren't, I would chiefly focus on, a Georgia that is affordable and individuals that vote where they live, not where they play, where they work, have great amenity-rich communities in which they can live, and I'm excited to lead an agency and work with the state and individuals who want to really focus on issues that, when it comes to the Department of Community Affairs and our low-income housing tax credits at 9% and 4% that drive and actually finance affordability, would make their chief aim to make sure that we not only do a great job in ensuring we still have those resources available, but advance that. And really focus on Atlanta and the citizens that live in it is an equitable environment. I know that working with Mayor Bottoms and her administration, and we'll speak to some of those other components with the new chief housing officer and affordability being the number one campaign initiative, that is something that I wake up, eat, sleep, and breathe every day to really bring innovation and some acceleration of what we're doing at the state level. We have to have collaboration and coordination to really make it work, because real estate development is complex enough to finance deals, but affordable housing real estate development is one that's even deeper. And so, I would look for a candidate that would really focus on that. And there are a lot of folks who need it, from the least of these homeless to those who are moving through the life cycle of home ownership, so that it's not just about the moment that you're renting, but also being able to participate as a homeowner.
Excellent. Thank you guys, and I'll let Ms. Mitchell carry it away.
Well, thank you so much, everyone, for coming out. And also, I just wanted to recognize Justin again, because as someone who often runs to breaking news, it's tough to run through a parking lot and then stand in front of a group of people and speak clearly and concisely. So thank you for that. That's a lot of skill. And you're here because you care and you understand the issues. Many of you, I spoke with some of you before everything got started. You're already involved in working in the trenches to bring those issues forward. And so we're certainly looking forward to digging a little deeper. And thank you all for coming here tonight. I want to pick up, I guess, with you, Mr. Riddick-Seals. You touched on what we were going to get into as far as your role, what you want to see, what you're hearing for the community. If you can, speak a little more in depth about what's the most challenging part that you see when it comes to housing, and what's your future, your idea or vision for the future as it relates to AHA.
Okay. Well, one of the things I do want to say is we're celebrating our 80th anniversary at Atlanta Housing. We did drop authority from the title of our name, and we're innovating in some ways with our branding and just our face, but we are celebrating. I started on May 9th, and approaching November 6th, it would be 6 months, but we hit the ground running. What a lot of people may not know is I served as a commissioner. It would be 3 years. I was appointed in July 2015 by then Mayor Reed to the commission, and I chaired a real estate committee. And the challenges that we're facing are not just the two sides of the house that we manage right now. We have our tenants that receive subsidy and our residents that we serve, which is over 23,000 households, about 53,000 individuals that we manage right here in Atlanta proper, which is our jurisdiction in which we serve subsidy. But also project-based rental assistance, we manage and work with a host of developers, and we have subsidy of probably 108 various mixed income, mixed use communities or apartment complexes, and as well as the down payment assistance that we provide to individuals that are seeking their home ownership through subsidies that we provide program-wise. But when you look at that spectrum of the homeless through some of our Haven and supportive housing programs that we need to address with that population, with a very low income, moderate, and then our workforce housing, which falls in what a lot of hearing out here buzzword called AMI, or area median income. For us, the Federal Register publishes that each month, and in Atlanta, in our our jurisdiction is $74,800. And so I want to make sure everybody understands that $74,800 is area median income in Atlanta. And when we finance a deal, essentially on the public housing side for real estate, we look for tiers of affordability that we can utilize our subsidy we receive from HUD, because we're more federal, we're 96% federally funded, and we are a state chartered authority, and our board is appointed by the mayor, and then from there the board appoints the president and CEO. I am serving as interim, but the results aren't interim, or one that I would say every day we go in there trying to solve for what we're doing in the market. But the challenges we're facing is the demand is outstripping the supply of housing, affordable housing stock. When you have rents that are driving north of $2.50 a square foot, and you have civil servants, teachers, individuals that we know and love, or even individuals sitting in this room that may not be able to have the amenities or just the quality of life given their income, but they work and they live and breathe right here in Atlanta and make Atlanta tick. Those are the issues that we're dealing with, and it comes in various pockets around the city. And so fair housing for me is something that we focus on every single day, making sure that we also utilize our greatest resource, honestly, which is our land that we still own. Back in the mid-90s, the Housing Authority issued relocation vouchers, and a number of folks moved down to Jonesboro and other areas. And we switched to a mixed finance structure of how we would bring those communities back with mixed income tenants, because you had 100% public housing. But what happened is you had, credit crisis hit, and the ability to underwrite these deals. And so we got a lot of land sitting out there right now. Individuals drive by Bankhead, Bowen, Hollywood Courts, some of our urban field and core land like North Avenue and Palmer, and we're taking a hard look in Inglewood at how do we, reactivate, bring some folks home, but also create what I call affordable housing driven mixed use development, so that it's not just housing, but it has retail, and individuals have a grocery store, or they can go to a coffee shop, get their dry cleaning done. And we got to think through some of our intergovernmental partners where the kids go to school, and transportation issues. So those are some of the myriad issues we're dealing with and focusing on every day.
And in aiming to meet those needs and going after those goals, how do you plan to work with the new chief housing officer that the mayor has named, or will there be any collaboration there?
The collaboration started this morning at 9 a.m. Share Lee's awesome. She previously was deputy commissioner of planning, focusing on housing. And as ex officio member of the mayor's cabinet, every Wednesday we meet. But one of the things that I came out of the blocks really zoomed in on with us, met with Mayor Bottoms, met with Richard Cox and the two deputy COOs, John King and Josh Williams, said we need to come up with a program and project management team to not focus just on the high level of, just policy alone, but we got to get under the hood and make this dirt move out here in the market. And so we de facto formed this program and project management mastermind group, it seems, of the intergovernmental agency leads. And so you now have, Atlanta Housing, the City of Atlanta, across really 4 departments, planning, Parks and Rec, Watershed Management, and Public Works, with Terry being involved in that group, as well as invest in the Beltline and senior leadership, getting under the hood of a pipeline of deals saying, hey, how do we finish this transaction? That when you look at what happens, political cycles change leadership, agency leaderships change, the staff stay the same, but the market and the residency get left behind a lot of times when these projects are starting to stop. And so we're coming up with ways to keep the projects moving, get the dirt moving, and figure out how to share resources and get new affordable and market rate units to create some communities moving. But Terry's been great, and we were huddled up at my office this morning at 9 trying to figure out what's next. And we spent some great time out in Seattle. I know Matt was out there with us. And so I think we've got a unique moment for leaders who get it. They're at the table, and it's not about us individually, it's about the we and this dash that we got between these two numbers, that the years of service that we have to solve for some things the city needs.
Okay. And segueing into the city now, Councilman Westmoreland, I think the last time I saw you, I was interviewing you about the bird scooters.
There you go.
A lot happening with that as well. You also served on the school board, and so you bring a unique perspective as well. And like you, I'm an Atlanta native from the DeKalb County area specifically. What would you say, now that you're in this role, are the top 2 key areas, key challenges for the city moving forward?
Yeah. So yes, it's true. I served a 4-year term on the school board from 2014 to 2018. And just quick background, one of the things that I think was true of the APS then that I think is true of the city now is in 2014, we had 6 new folks join the school board. And then 2 months after that, we hired a new superintendent. And that presented an opportunity for the governing team to kind of take a step back and rethink a whole bunch of stuff. We rewrote the mission and vision of the organization. We revised the strategic plan. We defined equity. We recalculated our budget, so we weighted funding based on student need. Adopted a new operating model based on pushing decision-making down to the schoolhouse. And those showed results. Graduation rate went from 59% to 79% over the last 4 years. But what it also showed me were 2 things. One, we had a $1 billion school system in a $2 billion city that weren't necessarily working together with each other, right? They were kind of doing their own thing, sometimes in opposition to each other, but not rowing in the same direction. And the second is that you can have as many awesome teachers and great principals as you can hire, but if there's a housing issue, or if if parents can't get to their jobs, or if kids can't get to school, then it makes things a whole lot harder. And so I think housing affordability, the 2 issues that they are more expert in are 2 enormous issues for the city. I'll add 2 more that I think they all tie together. One is we got to do a better job of making sure that our kids are getting to kindergarten ready to learn. 90% of a kid's brain develops before they turn 5 years old. And I was privileged to grow up in Morningside and went to preschool and lived in a 2-parent household where I was read to every night. And so I walked into kindergarten ready to go, right? I taught kids at Carver. I taught at Carver High School for 4 years before I joined the school board. And I would get to know their younger siblings, and I would go to Thomasville Heights or Slater Elementary School, and I would talk to teachers who said that we had 80 or 90% of kids coming into kindergarten who didn't know all the letters of the alphabet. And so one of the really heartwarming things I've seen over my first 10 months on council are, we had Mayor Bottoms and council president and the superintendent of APS and the board chair of APS and 7 or 8 other key folks sit around a table every other week from the end of February to the end of June talking about what we do about early learning in Atlanta and how the city needs to put some financial skin in the game and the school system needs to, and folks in the nonprofit and philanthropic and corporate communities need to as well. It's doable. We got about 15,000 4-year-olds and 15,000 3-year-olds. This is not a huge city. There is a way that we can make sure that every 2 and 3 and 4-year-old has access to early learning so that they're headed to kindergarten ready to learn. And then the other end of the spectrum is workforce development. We've got a program at APS called Achieve Atlanta, and if you are college bound, as about half our kids are, every May when they walk across the graduation stage, we've got college counseling during your senior year. We've got financial scholarships to cover you to help bridge the gap during your 4 years of college. And we stick with you during your freshman year of college because that's when kids most likely drop out. For the half of the folks walking across that stage who aren't walking onto a college campus, we have got to fix our workforce development apparatus. We got thousands of high schoolers and a lot of graduates who want to work, and I believe it is part of the city's responsibility to run a really effective workforce development agency that helps match our residents and their skills with their interests in jobs that exist in this city and businesses large and small. And if we can do those 2 things, we can make sure kids are ready to learn by kindergarten and that they're either walking onto a college campus or into a job that pays a living wage, that will do a whole lot toward easing the income equality, income gaps, and social mobility issues that we talk a lot about in the city.
Yeah. And I know there's another issue that may be top of mind to many people here. I know it's been in the news for weeks, and that's the Gulch. I also know that it was taken off to be discussed at a meeting this week, a special call meeting. But for people who don't know what the Gulch is or would be, tell us what it is, what it could mean for the city, and why we're seeing this resistance.
Yeah. All right, I got my Gulch story down to a tight 90 seconds. You guys ready? All right, so the Gulch is an empty hole in the ground. It sits between the new State Farm Arena and Mercedes-Benz Stadium. It's 40 acres. It was the home of the last rail station that Atlanta had that I think was torn down in 1972. So we're going on 45 years that nothing has been there. A lot of people have talked about it, about what could go there. 3 years ago, Tony Ressler bought the Atlanta Hawks. His brother is a real estate developer, and I think they both looked across the street and saw a big hole in the ground and said, I'm about to buy this sports team, there's a big hole across the street, you develop real estate, let's make something happen. And they started having a conversation with the city and the state about what it would take from a public subsidy perspective to fill up the hole, right? So I think CIM is bringing $200 million to the table in terms of buying 11 different pieces of land. They're willing to put up $500 million to build a platform. It's not every day that someone comes to a conversation with $700 million on the front end. I've always acknowledged that. That is unusual. The flip to that, I think, are three things. One is we're having a conversation right now about public subsidies up to $1.75 billion. The second is this is the last undeveloped 40 acres in the heart of downtown Atlanta. And we got to get that right. It sits on top of 2 MARTA stations. It is an incredibly unique opportunity to help build the downtown fabric of the downtown that we want. And hindsight's 20/20, and I know you can look back and rethink how you might have done something differently. I feel part of the reason that there is near universal public opposition to this project, and it is true, I've never seen something unify Atlanta. I go to meetings, as a citywide rep, I go to meetings on Haversham Road, and I go to meetings in Dixie Hills, and I go to meetings in Polar Rock, and nobody wants this to happen. Part of it is now I've gone beyond my 90 seconds, but part of it is I think people don't understand it. They think I'm getting ready to write a $1.75 billion check to a developer, which is not true. The public subsidy would come from future tax dollars that don't actually exist yet, right? Sales tax and property tax on the site. But we missed an opportunity 18 months ago to sit down with the public and say, we got 40 empty acres downtown and these people want to do something. Let's have a conversation about what this city and the 500,000 people who call it home think is important to put here, and then let's balance that against these developers who want to make a profit, as every developer one does. And so I have personally been trying to spend the last 6 weeks figuring out if there's a way to fix that this late in the ballgame. And I think what you see on council is 15 folks who want to make the decision, want to make the right decision, and want to hear from their constituents and balance what's a really complex
Getting
issue.
involved and going to meetings for yourself to hear what's being said, even requesting documents to educate yourself, because there are so many issues and opinions, and a lot of times that can color a certain topic if you don't have all the information. I'm going to move to Ms. Thomas, but I want you all to start thinking of some of the questions that you have, because we're going to open this up for a Q&A session, and we'll take those in just a few minutes. How's everything going so far? Things opening up? Some key issues? Very good. Transportation. You know I have to go here. Everywhere I go, it doesn't matter. I just got back from Dallas, a women's conference there, and you tell people you're from Atlanta, or you live in Atlanta, and they bring up 2 things. They ask me, well, do you know Nene? I know that you worked as chief of staff for several years with Marta, and I want to give you the opportunity to talk about some of the significant changes that were made during your time there that kind of set us up, even now for this expansion project I know that's underway. So we want to talk about the challenges, but also some of the moves that you all, Marta, did make in making us a more an easier city to get around.
Yes. Well, thank you for the question. I would start, we made a lot of changes, small and large, but I would say the three that were the most impactful was number one, we did a listening campaign in the first year. And you know what, I'll start with the fact that the previous CEO started with me. When he put out a recruitment effort of a chief of staff, a local chief of staff, and got recommendations from folks, when I sat down with them, he asked, would you want to join the team? And I was, and I had been working with the Beltline for the last 5 years. I was a part of the startup team, and it was just 7 people when it started in 06, 07. And we were pounding the ground, telling everybody about this wonderful project that was going to happen when we hadn't even bought the 22 miles of railroad yet. But it was going to happen, and it did. But with that being said, you know, it was a creative class group that was all between, from the CEO to the youngest person, we were between 30 and 42. So it all, you know, double degree, lived in the city, drunk the Kool-Aid. So imagine coming from that environment and then you're asking to work for Marta. I was very honest. No, like, if you would have asked me that yesterday, I would have said no. And he was like, well, tell me why not. And so when I told him some of those challenges, you know, that being on the side of the Atlanta Beltline and working with Marta as a partner, because you can't get anything done on the transportation front in this city without being a partner with Marta, because Marta at the time was the only place to receive funds. And I think we have a Marta member in the audience who knows all about our grant dollars. And so they were a federal recipient of funds. And so when, you know, they did pass-through funds to different local jurisdictions as well as the Atlanta Beltline, so we couldn't get the startup studies done. We couldn't get a lot done without Marta, and at the time, they considered Atlanta Beltline a little cute project. So we couldn't get a lot done, and so they weren't a good partner to us. And so I say all that to say the biggest challenge of Marta was reputation, the ability to partner with the region in a way where you can move forward progress. And that's what required that listening campaign in the first year. We listened to stakeholders everywhere, all over the city, every corner, from business to, you know, residents to civic communities to, it did not matter. Anybody that called the CEO's office and said they had ideas of how we could improve, they had, you know, suggestions of what we could do better, we listened, we took notes, and then we huddled. We huddled and we talked about what we could do, what could be early wins, what, you know, midterm, long term. And so out of that huddling, what came out of that, the three most impactful things was one, basically building our brand. Going everywhere we could just to say that Marta is listening and that Marta is doing the simple things that customers want us to do, which is to make it a more pleasant experience when you ride the existing system that we had. And that was just a simple ask. Just, can you make it a more clean, safe, and pleasant experience? So can we put more, you know, police out, and make them visible, make them accessible, make them community-oriented police that can, you know, answer questions, help you get through the system safely, etc. Treat you with dignity, etc. And so, you know, just doing the basics, basically. We went back to the basics, making it safer, cleaning it up, fixing broken things. So that listening campaign just allowed us to get back to the basics, and that helped build the brand. And then we started saving money everywhere we can. So for example, one of my early tasks was everyone who had an assistant's assistant was cut. I never heard of that before. I worked at Marta, that people have an assistant and your assistant has an assistant. So those were like just a lot of organizational inefficiencies were things I had to deal with internally. So I was internal facing. Keith and I were kind of bad cop, good cop, and he was external facing, and I was mostly internal facing, dealing with the organizational dynamics and business operations, and so we worked on the efficiencies internally, and then we worked on the basics externally with making your customer experience better. So that was the most impactful 2 items that built the brand of Marta, and it made people start thinking about us and talking about us differently. The second thing we did that was most important, I think, is that we increased the frequency of service. We increased our service and that we provided to our customers. Customers wanted to be able to have more service and wait less at peak hours, and it was a simple ask, being that we had raised fares what we did, the previous administration had raised fares, and so they raised fares and decreased service, and that just doesn't add up for customers. And so we started, increasing the trains service at the peak hours, and people really felt the difference. So instead of waiting like 10 to 15 minutes, they started waiting about 7 minutes. And that doesn't seem like much, but it's a big deal, and it made people come back to us, take a ride, try us, it gave you a thought, should I take Uber, should I take Marta? It's a straight line, it's Midtown, and right there's, Marlowe's Tavern, so I can just hop right off. So we became an option. We went from not thought of to becoming an option. And that was a lot in the first year or two. And then the third thing was, we took, much like Atlanta Housing Authority, we had a lot of land that we had bought up early on when the system started in the 70s and 80s, just securing parking lots for, like you build it and they will come. That was the whole mindset. And so we had a lot of underutilized parking lots and land all over our jurisdiction that we served, just Fulton County, DeKalb County at the time. And so we started utilizing, we did a feasibility study with some Bleakley consultants and figure out what is most likely we can leverage in combination with our stations, because at the end of the day, Marta opens every day for our core ridership, and those are the people that depend on Marta to get to work, to get their children to school. That's our bread and butter, so that's what we have to take care of first. And so we wanted to take that land that was situated around our systems, especially the systems and the stops that were utilized the most, and start partnering with the developers, because we don't do development. We wanted to partner with private development and said, okay, we have the land and we're going to remain in control of that land, and we're going to lease it to you for 99 years, and you develop it, but you got to develop it with this string attached so we can make sure that you serve, exactly, that you serve the least of these, our bread and butter. So we had guidelines like 20% of affordable housing that we did have to partner with our subsidy partners in order to get that done. But that took off and became a national example, and had other agencies calling us, asking us about how did you start this transit-oriented development program at a transit agency in Marta. So that was a big deal, and a lot of people got that because it was business, it was economics, and it made sense to the business community. And when Mercedes and State Farm decided to build on top of our station because it made sense, and that was the future of workforce development, then all of a sudden, it was a game changer for Marta. TOD and corporate relocations on top of our stations was a game changer, but that game changer wouldn't even been in place if we hadn't done the basics in year 1 and 2. So those were some of the challenges and impacts that we were able to do.
Great, and now just a segue, I took Marta last night to State Farm Arena for the first concert there. You all know what was the first concert? State Farm? So that's what you got, that's right. So Marta is smarter, I know that for a fact.
Definitely for entertainment.
And as we move into entertainment and the arts, and I want to get you in here, Ms. Love, the Mayor's Office of Cultural Affairs. I know, was it last week or a couple of weeks ago, you all had the Elevate series happening, and I know one of the sessions you all honored artists that came out of the SWAT,
Yes.
the SWAT Southwest Atlanta. I know T.I., many were mentioned there. For those who aren't familiar about what your office focuses on, tell us.
Okay, so my office is responsible for increasing the quality of life for residents and visitors to Atlanta. So we grant money to nonprofit arts organizations, to individual artists. We produce free festivals like Elevate, and there's some information about Elevate on your tables. We produce the Atlanta Jazz Festival. We also have a robust public art program, and our job is really, we commission new works of art, but we also have the responsibility for making sure that the art that is out in the public domain is in good condition and looks good. You know, we don't want it to detract from the environment. We also have 2 local galleries where artists have an opportunity to show their work who may not get professional representation with commercial galleries. We have an art center where we actually teach classes in how to produce art. And then we have a unique program that we started 14 years ago as a result of a date that my daughter, who's sitting right there, was having. My daughter was having with a young man, and I wanted to meet him. And so I suggested that he meet us at the Woodruff Art Center, and he didn't know where it was. And so it brought to my attention. Yeah, that was a deal breaker, right? But what it did was, it brought to my attention that this was, a young man who had come through the Atlanta Public Schools and wasn't aware of what our cultural ecology was. And so we started a program called the Cultural Experience Project, which is in collaboration with the Atlanta Public Schools, with our cultural venues, and with philanthropic interests here in the city, where we ensure that every child in the Atlanta Public School system gets to a cultural experience at a premier cultural institution on an annual basis that is tied to the Georgia curriculum standards at no cost to them. And so, thank you. The program is about $500,000, and we don't contribute to it out of the city general fund. We raise the money. And so we went to the arts organizations and said, we really want you to give us inventory of your field trips to take care of a class at the Atlanta Public Schools. So like for first graders, that's about 4,000 students. By the time they get to a senior in high school is about 2,500 students. So what happens to those students in between first grade and graduating from high school? And then, because when I surveyed the landscape of field trips, what I learned was that there were field trips happening, but Atlanta Public School buses weren't there. So it was an issue of whether or not the schools had an interest in, had a robust PTA that would pay for it. There were a lot of obstacles to our public school children getting access to our premier institutions. There was an argument, well, we need to take field trips, or we need to take art experiences to the school. Well, that's well and good. But I thought that it was very important for our children to, number one, learn where these places were within the city, and to go there so that they felt comfortable being there. When you go and you sit in Symphony Hall, then you learn the etiquette of how you act at Symphony Hall, and you get the best experience. You hear the music in the same way that patrons who go to the symphony hear the music. And so we developed kind of a curriculum. So every year, first graders, kindergartners go to the Botanical Garden. Pre-K goes to the Children's Museum. Second graders go to the ballet. First graders see Balletnik's Christmas Carol or Urban Nutcracker. Second graders see the ballet's Nutcracker. Third graders go to the symphony up till they see the opera. They go to the Fox. They, at the end of their journey through the Atlanta Public Schools, they will have a good understanding of what makes up the cultural life of this city. And I think that that's important because I believe that access to culture really helps you become more interested in the world. It gives you empathy for your fellow citizens. You learn how to appreciate the finer things of life that add to the quality of life. And I just think it's important that our children have a seat at that table. So we've been successful in doing this now for 14 years. Again, no money comes out of my budget. Matt, he sits on the finance committee, and he's promised me that I'm going to get my gas.
It's on the record.
One of the things that we do is we grant money to arts organizations, but we also raise money in order to present the free Atlanta Jazz Festival. The city contributes 25% of that budget. So we have to raise the rest of that budget from corporate sponsorships and, corporate vending and beverage sales and merchandise sales. So, and the same for Elevate. We produce Elevate, we make it free because I feel very strongly that access to culture should not be tied to whether or not you can afford to get it. It ought to be free and accessible. And so that's kind of my mantra, and we've been successful doing it for the years I've been there. A lot of years.
Exposure is critically important, especially the earlier you can get with the children, the better. I think now we're going to open it up to some questions for you all. Any questions? We have 2 mics, I believe. There's one there. There's one there. When you walk up to the mic, say your first and last name and keep your questions clear, short and concise, and direct them to anyone.
Hello, my name is Tirsa Gravely. I know that there are 5 amendments on the ballot for November 6th, and some of us have already voted perhaps, but for those of us who haven't, is there any information about either of the amendments that you'd like to share with us so that we can keep that in mind when going to the polls?
Good question. As the politician, I'll take that one unless anybody else wants to. Let's take a stab. So like you, I actually voted already. Try and do them from memory. I'm not going to be all that successful. So the way I have decided personally is yes, no, yes, no, yes. And then depending on what county you live in, there are a couple other referendum that deal with taxes and property exemptions and 2.6% caps and all that kind of stuff. But yeah, I can't even do them from memory. What you got?
Yeah, and just a tad again, I've seen some guidance as far as a breakdown of what the amendments mean. A lot of them deal, like the councilman said, with homestead exemptions, depending upon if you're a veteran, if you're an elderly person. I can forward some of that guidance if you'd like, after the meeting, to give you a perspective from a group that has gone through and kind of broken them down. But I'd say, keep an open mind again, nonpartisan organization, but that's pretty much the best I can do. The other thing, what I would say is, I would strongly encourage you all, number one, the early voting period is open now. And so there are a lot of locations and a lot of times that you can vote. The second thing I would do, to the councilman's point, and to your point, is to pull your sample ballot, go to the Secretary's website, Secretary of State's website, pull your ballot and read through the amendments, because it is tricky language, it's a lot of legalese, and it'll having a chance to digest that before you see it in the voting group for the first time will go a long way in helping you make sure that you make the correct decision. So I hope that can answer part of your question.
Thank you, Tirsa. I saw a few other hands.
Mr. Westmoreland, you talked about a lot of the opposition concerning the Gulch. So in place of the opposition, what are some of the recommendations or preferences, if any has been mentioned?
People who are supportive and why they're supportive,
We've
yeah.
heard a lot about the opposition, so.
Yep.
Of those that are opposing,
Yeah.
what would they envision or prefer instead of what's on the table?
Yeah, no, that's a fair question. And it goes back to, you can have an idea, the idea that probably has had the most traction over the last 30 or 35 years has been this multimodal transit station. And as recently as 2013, the state had a very nice 1,200-page proposal that sat on some digital bookshelf, right? Here's what we would build if we had $2 billion to build this thing. Though you don't even need a multimodal station if you're not going to have passenger rail that goes to other parts of the state. I think from they are proposing, it's a $5 billion project, 12 million square feet if they were to go all the way. It's 9 million square feet of office space, it's 1 million square feet of retail, it's about 1,000 residential units. And so I think when you listen to folks who are in favor of it, they will say things like, it's a $5 billion project and the developers are committing to do 38% minority and women-owned participation in terms of construction. That's a significant number. They've committed to funding a $28 million affordable housing trust fund, $12 million economic development fund, $2 million workforce development fund. 12 million square feet will probably bring, if they were to build all the way out, 9 million square feet of office space. It'd be about 35,000 jobs. It would certainly add to downtown Atlanta being vibrant, at least during the workday. I have some personal concerns about only having 1,000 residential units and 9 million square feet of office space. But I think I believe there are pros and cons on both sides. I have personally wrestled with this vote. I think most of the council has, which is why it hasn't happened yet. And so you got to balance what people are proposing and the positives with the significant money that governments would be foregoing for the next 20 or 30 years, and try and figure out what the right balance is. And to your point, there isn't really a backup plan right now. So you got this plan, or you got a hole in the ground for a little bit longer.
Some tailgating going on.
And so tailgating going on as we speak. The second place you would rather be after a panel with the 5 is drinking in the Gulch ahead of the Falcons' victory. Fingers crossed. But much like the 5 amendment questions, I'm happy to give you my card at the end and we can talk about the Gulch. It's all I talk about, so.
And we will have, yes, networking at the end as well. Sir?
Yes, that was a question I had, was also concerning the Gulch. I heard you mention public subsidies to the tune of $1+ billion.
Yes, sir.
And that the developer came to the table with about, was it 700 or did you say several million?
700.
700 million. So my question is, and this also segues into Ms. Love and the gentleman that's with the Housing Authority. When I think of public subsidies, it sounds like I'm going to be paying for something. So why isn't that some of those public subsidies is not directed towards Mrs. Love? Like the Black Arts Festival used to be about 2 weeks, and it was grand. Now it's down to a couple of days, and you have to find where the events are going to be. I heard the gentleman say that the Housing Authority receives federal funding, but maybe some of those public subsidies, local funds, go to help him out. But I wanted you to get into a little bit more about how that process works. If I'm a developer and I'm bringing 700 million and the subsidies of 1.6, what is the cost of the land? What is the city willing to sell it for? Just try to get an idea of those.
All good questions. So the way that I explain it to myself, and to anybody else who wants to talk about the Gulch, think of it as I'm being asked to create 2 bank accounts. One is future sales tax revenue that would be created at the 1 million square feet of retail that I discussed earlier. And the second bucket is future property tax revenue. And so right now, the Gulch is producing nothing in sales tax because there's nothing happening on site, and very little property taxes at all. The land is owned by Norfolk Southern, Marta, the state of Georgia, the city of Atlanta, I think are the 4 principal owners. And so the request of the developer is, we have talked to the 5 landowners, and we have, the 11 parcels under contract. So we're going to go spend $200 million to buy those 11 pieces of land. And then we're going to spend $500,000 to bring what is a 40-foot hole in the ground up to street level, right? By literally building a platform, think Atlantic Station, but way bigger. And then we're going to build a whole bunch of stuff on this site over the next 10 to 15 years. And so in exchange for that, where you are currently receiving no sales tax and no property tax, we're going to ask you to create these 2 bank accounts. And when I put up a whole bunch of different stores and restaurants and bars and shops, and people start buying stuff at those places, a portion of that sales tax revenue is going to go into this bucket to reimburse the developer for the stuff that he built, to the tune of $1.2 billion in the sales tax bucket. On the property tax side, there's about to be their new terms of the deal that I actually haven't seen yet in print, but I understand that there's a $600 million cap, and so same thing, there's nothing built on this site right now. We're going to go build millions and millions of square feet of stuff. It's going to be property that'll be worth something, so you'll have to pay property taxes on it. The developers are asking up to $600 million over the next 20 years. The property taxes that they would have paid to governments, the school system, the city, and the county, are going to go into this bank account to reimburse them for $600 million in construction costs. So if you take the $1.25 billion sales tax bucket and the $600 million property tax bucket, this one's over 20 years, this one's over 30 years, you get a situation where right now nothing is being generated. The request is for them to basically keep all of the tax money that would be generated for the next 2 or 3 decades to a total of $1.8 billion. Their argument is, you're not getting anything right now, so we'd like to be reimbursed for this great big giant thing we're about to build. And the response to that, I think there are a lot of them. One is, how do you feel about foregoing taxes for that period of time? I think there's a compelling argument to be made that if an office building isn't built on this site, then it might be built at the corner of West Peachtree and 3rd Street on a piece of land that would generate property tax revenue and sales tax revenue at some point before 2038 or 2048. And so that's what you gotta, that's what we're weighing, is this $5 billion project worth $1.7 billion in future tax money not coming to the governments that it would normally come to?
Start building if you have land and subsidies and federal money, but why the developers aren't building?
Well, that's a great question, and one I think is interesting because it's very similar to Matt's answer, but in a different way. So my private sector background is one that let's just think of this as a P&L. We got a lot of advanced degrees, it's the National Black MBA Association, but it's about revenue and operating expenses producing the ability to have an asset or the actual property, whether it's multifamily or, and I can talk about for sale, that can cover the debt service that it took to actually produce the asset. And so when you look at, I'll just put a deal together for you real quick. I like to use really 3 or 4 boxes. Acquisition, the land. It is very expensive in Atlanta to buy a piece of dirt per acre or per square foot pro rata of that acre. Public infrastructure. When you look at the utilities of water, sewer, gas, and power, or Georgia Power, to be able to get the infrastructure in place before you can go vertical, your soft cost, design, engineering, your hard cost, the actual construction. And then you produce the asset that goes vertical and actually generating revenue. In the private sector side, developers think revenue-minded. In the public sector side, we think budget allocation deployment-minded. And so when you have a public subsidy that is here to say, all right, we're getting rents right now on a unit in a multifamily asset north of $2.50 a square foot. And I've got, let's just say, 100 units in a building. And I have to buy the land, sink the cost that doesn't generate any revenue in the public infrastructure, design it, engineer it, and then build it with increasing interest rates, construction labor, material, and then other costs to actually underwrite it with the financing structures that are out there. your rents start getting driven up because you gotta cover what it takes to actually service the debt, given the equity that you put into the deal. And if you start looking at a debt equity structure of about 20/80, we really know that's not gonna happen. So you gotta get common equity and then preferred equity. You get into these financial structures where you go, okay, who is the tenant that can live in that unit and pay that rent that I have to make my deal work? And then you really gotta slice the unit payment into components where you go, all right, if I've got rents north of $2,000, but the tenant that I need to produce these X percentage of affordable units in that building can only pay me Y, you start going, how do I actually utilize these subsidies and get the profile of tenant and make sure that they can stay there for that contracted period of time so that I can either refinance it at some point or sell it and then maintain those affordable units for that period of time. And that's the balance that we play in the game of affordable housing, because developers have to purchase the property if it's not already owned by the public. And that may be exorbitant. I mean, we've got acreage. I've seen an acre of land sell for almost $20 million in some areas of town. Okay. And I've seen it even in Midtown go for, multiple, getting close to the tens of millions of dollars in Midtown to getting into even downtown now, where we were calling Sono, south and north, where we're sitting right now on the precipice of. And if that sunk cost to get out of the dirt is already driving your total development cost up, and you gotta have it acquired, figure out what the heck is under the ground right now. Perfect example, look across the street at Civic Center. There's a detention vault that has a pretty hefty cost, and it's not generating any revenue yet. But somebody's gotta cover that cost. And so you gotta come up with TADs, or what Matt's describing as a net present value of how far can I stretch out this financial model to be able to get this money now that I need to address this, when I don't have any means of revenue coming in to cover that cost on an incremental basis, whether it's every day, hotels, every month, apartments, multi-year, that's your other product types. And so structuring the financing on these deals gets very complex. And so we step in as a housing authority and we work with intergovernmental partners to say, do you have transit-oriented development land that we can ground lease in lieu of acquiring? And you go, okay, we want to institutionalize affordability or the mobility for those developer and ultimately the end user, the tenants. But for us, it's going to be the affordable tenant that lives there. And I say, all right, if I got an acre of dirt and it could trade at $1 million or $3 million, but I want to lower that cost and do it via ground lease, and that's going to lower what you actually have to pay me in the rent to make your deal work, you start coming up with ways that the public-private partnership comes together to make it work, and then the subsidies kick in, and that's the tug of war that goes on with developers every day. And I switch positions a lot of time to try to translate this and code switch between, I can think like you, the developer that has a structured financial model that says, okay, I need X percentage of that dollar that the renter's going to pay me to cover that spread so that we can have an affordable unit for this income tier of a tenant. Area median income, 60% AMI, or 80 to 120. You start getting into, they make about 40 grand, they make 50 grand, 60 grand, or north of even that 74, 80. It gets complex, but I think it's important to understand both sides of how a tenant sees it and how a developer sees it. And they're solving for a gap financing. I mean, honestly, and then they start layering in the subsidies to be a source of funds and their sources of uses in their financial models. But we also got to tie it to a period of time when we can truly keep it there. We're dealing with some issues with for sale housing right now, where we got to solve for this because, there's land that the housing authority owns or even that public, partners own, where in areas of town, if I just sell it to a for-profit developer and they produce a single-family detached or attached, duplex or townhomes, we may drop affordability down for a moment, and that is to lower what it costs to build it, design it, engineer it, and maybe even buy the dirt. But the difference with a residential house is that it's fee simple, so you get the dirt and the house above it, not like commercial where you can strip the land from underneath the house, the asset above it. But what happens if you help drive down, somebody can buy this house for $200,000 and it sits next to a house that's worth $800,000? Then you get in this shared appreciation conversation. And then we start having to look at restrictive covenants or declarations of trust we can put into the purchase and sale agreement because you use a public subsidy to help someone buy a home that was profiled that made X percent of dollars. And we want individuals to win, but it's not Mega Millions over here. I'm not trying to say, hey, I just want to buy a house. And then, whammy, you made $600,000, maybe you want to sell it the next month or sell it in the next year. We're solving for some interesting things that we have to think through right now so that the public doesn't look back at the subsidy that we provide on a full tier and spectrum. The for lease, multifamily, and mixed use components, and that for sale, where we're running into some unique issues because look at what the Beltline amazingly produced in the Old Fourth Ward. I can drive down North Highland right now and we literally watch that area transform. You look at Emmett Quarter, and I was talking to somebody the other day where they bought in the Auburn Avenue County Historic District for like $150,000 back when Freaknik was still going on. All right? And they just pulled comps. And they're sitting here in tug of war with themselves like, oh, do I sell it or do I not? I was like, where's your comps come in? Well, 860. But they used subsidies for down payment assistance, and they layered it, and now it's in this burn-off period, and you're going, man, this is what we helped produce, but we don't want to take it away. And I know this is a long answer, but I want y'all to know some of these things that we deal with where it's the public's money. You all helped either an individual own the home or lease it to live in the city. But then now we're in this economy that the transaction velocity is just tremendous right now. And we've got to think about, how do you keep Atlanta Atlanta? How do you use the public's trust to make sure we leverage so it is equitable? And then how do you use the dollar to make sure that we're fair and balanced, that we're talking about mobility issues, that we're making sure that arts and our cultural amenities and public infrastructure can be addressed. These are some of the things that open up just a honey hole of answers, but I like tossing these out there so you all know how we have to solve for it, because yes, it's federal dollars, state and local, but I've got to think long range and in that 20-year, 30-year model so that when I'm not sitting in the seat or anybody's not in that staff, we're still making the right decisions with the public's interest. And, that's the way we try to solve for it.
Thank you. This will be our final question. And if you have more, it's okay, because you can speak with us after we begin the panel's over and network that way as well. Okay?
Hi, Mom. My question actually isn't for you, it's actually for Brandon. And it might just tie into what you were just saying, but I was born and raised here, and I used to think that Atlanta was always someplace I could come back, not have to make $1 million a year, and could live affordably. I have a condo in Atlantic Station I've had for 8 years. If I were to rent in Atlantic Station right now, I could not afford to live there. And the only reason I can afford to live there is because I own my condo. So my question is related to kind of, as regular people in affordable housing, are we getting to a situation where, are we going to be in like a rent-controlled city? I mean, there's 4 or 5 new buildings going up in Midtown. I don't think we need any more buildings in Midtown. So I'm just kind of wondering what y'all's plan is, because, I mean, it really is getting out of control. I mean, about 4 or 5 years from now, I'm not even going to be able to afford my condo based on the taxes. So just throwing that out there.
Is that a comment or a question?
I just want to say one thing, that you're not alone, first of all, because it's not just about the affordable public that can't first get in the house. It's about those of us like you. I bought a condo in 2006, and that's the only way I still own in 4th Ward. But recently, I just got married. We bought a little 2,000 square foot house in Inman Park, like the edge of it, And I mean, we have 1 kid. Like, if I get another one, like, where am I gonna live? And I refuse to leave the the city proper. So what am I going to do? You know, and so it's also about growing families. You can't even grow your family in Atlanta, like, because mostly people move out. It's like the minute they have a kid or two, they're leaving the city because they can't afford to get real estate larger than 2,000 square foot. And you had to have bought that like 5+ years ago. So, I mean, don't sell.
It's the same thing we're using right now, that if the public's trust owns land, principally through multiple entities, we are not selling. We are trying to think through how can we not produce affordable housing, but housing that's affordable. The profile of who is that tenant now or buyer has changed, and it's not someone receiving a subsidy that's not working, sitting in the house all day, you know, playing, you know, well then it would have been crossword puzzles, and now it's looking at apps. It's working. We have a work requirement. Atlanta Housing is an MTWA, so it's moving to work. So to receive a subsidy as a tenant or as a property owner, be it through a landlord, single-family detached or attached, or a multifamily apartment, there's a work requirement that comes along with it for the subsidy that tracks. And so the workforce development and the literacy and the wraparound programs that we provide. But one of the things that I'm zooming in on is how do we, that are all at the table together, collaborate and play land defense. I mean, let's just be honest. You know, you have different facets like the city and looking at inclusionary zoning, where if you want to have an approval for a certain property in a particular area, there's a percentage of affordability that you have to have. We're looking at...
Sorry to interrupt you, but I'm like, who do those units go to? I don't know anyone who has ever gotten an affordable housing unit at one of these places. I've never heard about applying for an affordable housing unit. I don't know anybody who has ever...
Let's be honest, we're playing catch up in Atlanta. I mean, we're in a real estate city, whether you like it or not. And there is an era of stock that got produced, and there weren't policies in place to ensure that this was a part of the conversation. And it's why we're playing catch up. I mean, we took a bit of a detour in zooming in on this, and I think, you know, in some regards we fell asleep at the wheel, or people can call it the frog got boiled. And then we woke up and we're like, oh my gosh, look at all these units that are here, but also look at what I like to also throw out here is affordable housing, mobility issues, public infrastructure, and cultural arts. These are economic development tools. You won't get the Amazons that you want if you can't solve for these things. You don't get Mercedes-Benz, NCR. You don't keep a Delta. You don't keep a Home Depot and Georgia Power, Southern Company. They'll stay here. But unless you can keep the individuals who make your businesses tick, satisfied, and their kids going to school and things of that nature, and if they can't live and they're you know out of breath because they drove from Alpharetta trying to get here. You don't want them showing up to work like that. So, Tanner, I'll use that to turn it back over to you.
No, Brandon, that was a perfect segue. Crystal, though, to answer your question, this is part of the reason why we put this panel together, so you all can see why it's important to have somebody who used to be a commercial web developer in the seat that he sits in, or somebody that used to be in Teach for America and used to teach at some of these local schools in the seat that he sits in, and the importance of having talented, thoughtful leaders in the positions that they're in, and making these decisions. So one more time, please give the panel a round of applause. And thank you to our great host, Marissa and Rachel.
Just a token of our appreciation.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. I should have done ladies first.
You're doing fine.
Thank you.
Sure.
What a gentleman.